The Tennis Gambling Podcast and the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Fantasy. Sign up with the promo code SGPN. Get 50% positive bonus to $1,000. Also brought to you by Rhythm. Leader in data-driven picks and props. Get a 7-day free trial today by going to sportsgambling.com/RTHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, the second episode of Monday, January 20th. It's currently about 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Our host, always, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Time to get into the women's quarterfinal matches. So we are officially at that stage in the Grand Slam. We're going to cover the men's and the women's matches from this point going forward. So if you're looking for tennis episodes, we got you covered both for the men's and women's, because we're going to cover the semis and the finals as well for the women's side as well as the men's side. So getting into the actual game plan, once again, we are officially in the quarterfinals. We're going to break down all four matches on the women's side, and then we'll get into the lock and dog pick at the end of the show. For that, though, I do want to recap what happened last episode, at least for the men's round of 16 episode. I know we just recapped it in the last episode. If you weren't aware, by the way, this is the second episode of the day. So if you do want the men's breakdown, then I do have that already posted. So keep that in mind as we did the men's quarterfinal episode right before this one. So if you do want my overall thoughts, once again, for the lock and dog pick in more depth, for the recap, I kind of covered it last episode. So I'll get into it briefly. I'm not going to dive too much into it. The point is, overall a good round of 16 for us. So for the lock and dog, ended up not getting a sweep, but we also went undefeated. Should have been a sweep, though, as Draper ended up quitting. We had Alcaraz in straight sets at -120. Draper was down 2-0. Decided my back's hurting me too much. I cannot continue, and he ended up quitting. So overall, kind of a heartbreaker there for the lock. For the dog, though, nice and easy. Had Sonego -2.5 games at +110 against Tien. Tien really just didn't have enough firepower to, I'd say, match Sonego's, and Sonego was able to take control of points early and often. Came to the net very successfully. Thought he did a good job of forcing the issue, and it seemed like Tien was constantly on the back foot. Not to mention the fact Tien had a hamstring issue, which wasn't a factor in the second set. Then he came out and won the third, but then Sonego buried him in the fourth. So overall, nice win there, never in doubt. So once again, not a sweep technically. Should have been, is what it is. But hopefully we'll get a sweep here on the men's episode and the women's episode for the quarterfinals. Now for the actual recap of the round of 16. To get into the recap, starting off with the first matchup, you saw Sabalenka destroy Andreeva as she won 6-1, 6-2. Goff ended up beating Bencic, which was a fun matchup, though. Ended up going to a pretty long first set, 7-5 in favor of Bencic, and then you saw Goff dominate the last two sets, 6-2, 6-1. You saw Vekic lose, though, which was a heartbreaker for us, but you ended up seeing her lose to Pavlyuchenkova. I'm gonna completely butcher the name here. To Pavlyuchenkova, who was able to win that one 7-6, 6-0. And then you saw Badoza, who ended up beating Danilovic in straight sets in that one. For the other matchups, though, you saw Svitolina outlast Kudermetova as she ended up winning that one 6-4, 6-1. Seemed like Kudermetova just hit a wall at some point, and Svitolina was able to get the job done. Then you ended up seeing Keys beat Rybakina as she won in 3 sets. I'll get back to the breakdown there for Rybakina in a second. For the other matchups, though, you saw Navarro outlast Kasatkina in 3 sets, and you ended up seeing Swiatek beat Liss 6-0, 6-1. So overall, not too much, I'd say, not too many surprises. Keys beating Rybakina is a surprise to some, not to me. Besides that, though, Vekic losing I thought was a bit surprising, but she also was about 40-1 to win the quarter anyway. So we were happy she got that far in the first place. But overall, not too many shocks. Felt like most of the favorites ended up winning, but it turned out to be a pretty interesting round of 16 for the women's side. Now, for the actual quarter recaps, or I should say the quarter pick recaps that we had for the outrights, getting into it. So for the first quarter, we had Sabalenka at -143, and we had Schneider at a 23-1, and we had Vekic at 48-1. So, of course, we have Sabalenka, who's a massive favorite to win this matchup in the next round. So she should end up cashing for us, but Schneider lost a 3-set marathon to Navarro, and you ended up seeing, to Vekic, I mean. They had a massive war that ended up landing, I think it was 7-5 in the third. So that could have gone either way. Schneider, though, gave it a good run, but Vekic outlasted her in 3. And Vekic, we had 48-1. Unfortunately, she could not make it back to the quarters for an auto victory for us, either Sabalenka at -143 or Vekic at 48-1, as she ended up losing. So hopefully Sabalenka gets it done there at -143. No regrets, though. Thought it was just a very solid breakdown of the quarter by us, and we had 3 players who made pretty respectable runs. Of course, Sabalenka is the only one we got left. Hopefully gets the job done there at -143. For the second quarter, this one is actually an auto win for us. Pretty good prices, too. So for the second quarter, we have Goff at plus 110. We have Pagula at 9-1, who lost already. And we have Bedoza at 16-1. So overall, can't complain. You get a plus 110 to 16-1. So we are free rolling here in the second quarter. So keep that in mind. A nice quarter win nonetheless. Bedoza wins at 16-1. Great price for us. We'll see if you can get the upset done. But either way, can't complain. Definitely what we wanted to get in the second quarter. For the third quarter, can't complain either, as we do not have an auto win, but we do have Keys at 5-1, who's still alive, and you have Paolini, who ended up losing at plus 600, as she lost in three in a set. She actually won the first set against Svitolina. They kind of fell apart after that. But for the actual quarter here, can't complain about having Keys at 5-1. She just won a title the week prior to the Australian Open, so I like their overall form. Now, we've mentioned this before on the show, but I'll say it again. I really never take Rybakina when she's favored to win the quarter. I don't trust her. It's a common theme. She'll make a deepish run to the round of 16 or even the quarters, and she'll lay an egg. And we saw that against Keys in the last match, as she ended up kind of just getting outplayed. Keys was really hitting her spots, though, with the power shots that she has, but it just seemed like a common theme for Rybakina, who has made a Grand Slam. She's won a Grand Slam title before, made a couple Grand Slam finals, and yet it feels like she always chokes in these spots when she's favored to win the quarter. So we stayed away from her. I think it was plus 150. I hated the price, went for some long shots instead, but we went out of our way to fade Rybakina, and so far it worked out. Of course, we'll see if Svitolina ends up beating Keys, because if that's the case, we lose the quarter anyway. But at 5-1, we have a favorite into the quarterfinals. If you want to hedge, you can take Svitolina if you want to. For auto profit, a point is though Keys, though, was definitely a solid play at 5-1 for that price point. For the last quarter, this one should be pretty interesting because we do have Swiatek at minus 110, and we have Putintseva, who ended up losing at 16-1. But Swiatek's been on the warpath, so minus 110, I feel pretty good about. She's a massive favorite against Navarro in the quarterfinal matchup, so hopefully Swiatek gets it done. Now, I am a bit annoyed, though, at myself, because for the fourth quarter, before picking Putintseva, I was actually torn between Putintseva and Navarro. Navarro was on the short list of my potential options, but the problem was I didn't like Stearns as her first-round matchup, and Navarro was in really bad form entering the Australian Open, so I decided to pivot elsewhere. But I feel like I had her written down, and I eventually erased her. But I was going to take Navarro too. I didn't do it. So we could have had two potential auto wins for the quarters here on the women's side. Instead, we only have Swiatek at minus 110. For the outrights, though, for the event, we only have the favorites left. We have Sabalenka at plus 240. We have Goff at 5-1. We lost Pagula at 50, and we also lost Paolini at 60. But still can't complain. We have two of the favorites here at 240 and 500. We'll see if either of them can get the job done. So once again, overall, a pretty good quarter episode for us, as a lot of people that we still have are alive. We definitely are still alive in pretty much every quarter, and we'll see how that shapes up here over the next few days. Now, nothing else really to recap, though, for the round of 16, so now it's time to get into the preview of the quarterfinals. For that, though, I want to remember once again that we are brought to you by DraftKings, because the playoffs are here. A reminder, you have the conference title games in the AFC and NFC taking place over the weekend. A reminder, if you do want to check out ways to bet on DraftKings, you can also bet on touchdown scores, because that's definitely important for the sake of football. But a reminder, if you do want to bet on touchdowns, you can definitely try it out, as DraftKings is the official sports betting partner of the NFL. A reminder, though, that when you do make a new account, new customers will get a great promo. Bet $5 to get $200 bonus instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code SGP. Code SGP for new customers to get $200 bonus instantly. When you bet just $5 only on DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Just finished recapping the women's round of 16 and the Australian Open. Time to move on into the quarterfinals. Starting off with the first quarterfinal matchup on the slate. First match is going to be a pretty interesting one, as you do have a matchup between Goff and Badoza. Now, for this one, Goff's around minus 350, Badoza's around plus 280. For the spread here, you have minus 4.5 for Goff, plus 4.5 for Badoza. For the over-under, you have 20.5 games. The over's about, it's a little bit juiced, though, minus 120. For the set spread here, you have Goff and straight set to minus 120. You have Badoza to win a set at minus 110. The over 2.5 sets is plus 160. Now, that's actually been competitive. It's currently tied 3-3, so you have seen each player have moments here. Each of the last two meetings resulted in a Goff marathon win. Face-off in Beijing last year, saw Goff win that one in 3 after dropping the first set. Face-off in Rome in last year's card as well in the clay slate, and you saw Goff lose the first set and win in 3. Before that, though, Badoza did win 2 straight, so keep that in mind. But in the hard court history on the outdoor courts, Badoza currently is tied 2-2 with Goff. So head-to-head is pretty close here. Now, for the actual path, Goff's dropped one set, won in each of the first 3 rounds comfortably, then lost the first set to Bencic, who was in good form, that eventually did win in 3. As for Badoza, kind of the same boat, ended up dropping one set in the round of 32, but besides that, she's won every other match in straight sets. So both players have been solid, and that's good for us, as we have each player to win the quarter. So once again, we have Goff at plus 110 and Badoza at plus 1,600. So that would be a nice price if Badoza gets it done. Now, for the matchup, though, I think Goff should be favored. I think she's looked really good. The serve's been solid. The second serve has not been as big of an issue as it has been in previous years. And you're looking at Goff, who I just think has a bit more firepower than Badoza. Now, Badoza, I do think, has the game to make life difficult because she is a pretty solid baseliner as well. But for the matchup here, it's tough to find value on Goff when it's minus 4.5, and you're trying to find ways of backing a minus 350 favorite against a player that's had success against her in the past. For this one, I think I just like the over for this matchup. I think you're looking at what should be a pretty close battle between two players that kind of know each other well. It's 3-3, though, in the head-to-head. Each of the last 2 meetings did go to a deciding set. So even when Goff wins, it tends to not be the most comfortable experience in the world. I see a close matchup here where I think Goff eventually pulls it out. Just think she has a bit too much firepower. I think her court coverage is a bit too solid. Badoza, I think, will threaten to win a set. She might actually win a set in this one. It wouldn't shock me. So maybe if you want to go for value, the over 2.5 sets at plus 260, at plus a 160, I don't hate. I think a marathon is a pretty realistic outcome for this one, but I think that Goff is going to eventually outlast Badoza, and I do think that her serve is better than Badoza's, which might be the deciding factor. At least the first serve is. So I'll go with Goff to get the job done. Tough to find value, though. I think I have to go with Badoza plus the games at 4.5, but I prefer the over, and I prefer the over 2.5 sets for value at plus 160 on that one. Moving on to the next matchup, previewing the matchup between Sabalenka and I'm going to keep butchering this name because it is a long one. Pavlyuchenkova. So for this one, Sabalenka, obviously a massive favorite. She's minus 1,000. As for, I'm going to keep testing myself until I get comfortable with the name. Pavlyuchenkova. Pavlyuchenkova. Yeah, so point is that Sabalenka is expected to kill her. The spread is 6 games here, and the over-under set at 18.5. For the set spread, you have minus 1.5 sets for Sabalenka, minus 260. You have plus 200 the other way. And for the over 2.5 sets, you have plus 260. Now, decent amount of head-to-head history, though, but it is dated. As we're looking at the dog here, actually being right now the better off in the head-to-head. As we're looking at Pavlyuchenkova, who's currently 2-1 lifetime against Sabalenka. Now, every meeting was dated. Last meeting was 2021. So they faced off in the French Open. So Sabalenka lose in 3. Faced off on clay in Madrid in 2021. Sabalenka won in straight sets. Faced off in Toronto. And that was a 3-set loss by Sabalenka, but that once again was about 5.5 years ago. So head-to-head history, toss out, doesn't really mean much. 2 meetings on clay and 1 meeting about 6 years ago on hard court. So to go through the path, though, Sabalenka's been great. She's not dropped a set yet. She probably should have, though, as Towson was serving for the first set in the round of 32. But Sabalenka broke back and eventually did win in straight sets. So she's been phenomenal. She's won 10 straight matches. She's won 10 straight sets. She's been rolling, and we'll see if you're looking at Pavlyuchenkova, you can maybe turn back the clock and make the match interesting, or she gets buried like everyone else. Now, she had a couple marathon matches in the first 2 rounds, then won the last 2 matches in straight sets. Vekic, though, was definitely I'd say a surprise win for me. I thought Vekic would win that one, personally. A nice win there. First set was competitive. Won the first set tiebreak 7-0, then buried Vekic 6-0 in the second set. So for the matchup here, it's tough to find a lot of value with a minus 1,000 favorite. And you're looking at Pavlyuchenkova, who has actually had success against Sabalenka in the past, so maybe you're picking her to not get totally embarrassed. It's tricky. I think for this one, I actually am going to give her some benefit of the doubt here. I think I am going to go with the, you know what? I think I'll go with the. I don't want to go team total over for Pavlyuchenkova actually, or do I want to go with the games here at about 6.5? I think I'll go with the 6.5 games. It's a bit juicy, but I think at the end of the day, you're looking at Sabalenka, who doesn't really care how much she wins by, as long as she ends up advancing. I think you're looking at Sabalenka winning, but based on the history, I think that Pavlyuchenkova will not be intimidated by the overall spot. So I am going to go. By the way, John, trying to help me out pronunciation here. Pavlyuchenkova. Thank you. Appreciate that, John. Hope things are going well for you. Shout out to Ian. Thanks for stopping by as well. So once again for this matchup, I think Sabalenka's going to win. Tough to find value, though, as you have a minus 1,000 favorite. I think for this one, just give me the potential games here, or give me the dog here, the team total over 6.5 games. Sabalenka could win, but it does feel pretty disrespectful when you factor in how good the oppositions looked in the event. I think beating Vex in straight sets impressive. So for this one, I am going to go with the dog here. I'll go with the team total over. Sabalenka is going to win, but once again, trying to get creative with the actual value here. Sabalenka to win in straight sets is minus 260. You really can't find any value in this matchup, so I'll go with the dog here. I'll take a spin. Give me the dog team total over 6.5 games here for this one. Moving on to the next matchup, you have Keys against Svitolina, which should be the most competitive matchup, at least based according to the odds. Keys is minus 195. You have Svitolina at plus 170. For the actual games rating, you have minus 3. For Keys, you have plus 3 for Svitolina. For the over-under in games, you have around 22 or 21.5. Set spread, you have Keys in straight sets at plus 130. You have Svitolina plus 1.5 sets at minus 160. The over 2.5 sets is minus 130. Now, head-to-head's been close. It's currently 3-2 in favor of Keys. Faced off in 2022. Most recent meeting was in Adelaide. Saw Keys win in straight sets. US Open 2019, Svitolina won in straight sets. Australian Open 2019, Svitolina won in 3. Point is, no matches have been even close to recent, so you don't know if you could actually use it, but the head-to-head history is currently 3-2. And every meeting was on hardcourt, by the way, so keep that in mind. Now, for the actual path here, Keys has been sharp, won the Adelaide title, then ended up dropping a set to Roos in a marathon there in the second round, then beat Collins in straight sets and beat Rybakina in 3. As for Svitolina, she's been good, only dropped one set in the entire event, and that was to Paolini, so that was against a top seed in the event, and she got the job done there in 3 with a bagel in the final set. So Svitolina has been very sharp. A reminder, we do have Keys to win the quarter at 5-1. So if you do want to potentially hedge it, you can with Svitolina at plus 170. Now, I think the price sounds about right. I think Keys should be favored, especially after beating Rybakina. However, I think it's going to be a tough match for her. I think Svitolina is a bad matchup for Keys. Keys does have a lot of firepower, but the unforced error count can get drastically high, and you are looking at Keys, who is viewed as a perennial choker, if we're being honest here, throughout her tennis career, does win some titles, but in Grand Slam events seems to always fall on her face in big moments, and I think this could be a spot where Keys could be an upset alert for this matchup. Svitolina has been playing well, only dropping one set, and I think you're looking at Svitolina, who should be able to make Keys' life difficult. Now, I think Keys should be favored once again, so I do agree with the overall, I'd say, pricing. Keys might be a little bit steep, though. I'd probably put Keys at like minus 160 if I had to price it. I think 195 is a bit high. But for the value, I think Svitolina is alive to win it. I see a marathon, though. I do like the over in this one. I think you're looking at the head-to-head history, and you're looking at the overall form of both players. I see a pretty competitive battle here. So I'll go with the over of 422 games. For the sets, though, the over 2.5 sets of plus 130, I do like quite a bit. I think you're going to see each player with different styles kind of have their moments here. Keys, the whole match comes down to her racket, though, because the unforced errors mixed with her aggression will determine the entire outcome. If Keys hits her spots like she did against Rybakina, and she also is able to unload on both wings, she'll win. But if she ends up hitting like 50 unforced errors, I think she's got a decent chance of losing, because Svitolina is pretty, I'd say, rock solid when it comes to her overall game plan and her overall tennis skills. So for this one, I think Svitolina actually has a decent chance to pull this off. So for value, I'm going to go with the dog here. I think 195 is a bit high, so I'll go for the value, but I prefer the over in this one. Competitive at the history, both players in good form. Keys also could battle some fatigue, as she had a 3-setter against Rybakina in the last round, but she also just won Adelaide right before it. So she's played a lot of sets of tennis, as 3 of the last 4 matches in Adelaide went to a deciding set, and then 2 of the first 4 matches here in the Australian Open went to a deciding set. Keys has been on the court for a long time in Australia, and Svitolina really is not. So that is a pretty decent edge for Svitolina in terms of potential stamina, so keep that in mind. But for the value, give me Svitolina, and for the favorite play here, I'll go with the over in this one, whether it involves games or sets. Moving on to the next match, we're going to talk about the last one. You have Navarro taking on Swiatek. Now, we're at the stage in the event where you can make the argument it's Swiatek versus why bother, because Swiatek is destroying everybody. Swiatek, though, has not dropped a set. She's been great. She was very good in the United Cup, did lose to Goff. Then after that, she's been dominant in the event. Has not dropped more than 4 games in a single set up to this point, as she's won every set here very comfortably. Navarro's been the opposite. Navarro has been able to win every match so far, but they've all involved a final set competitive war, because you're looking at the final sets here. Stern 7-5. You saw Wang, that was 6-4. Jabeur 6-4, and Kasatkina was 7-5. So the point is, comparing the actual time on court, it is a night and day difference between once again Navarro, who's been a 3-set marathon I'd say expert, and Swiatek, who just shows up and dominates the opposition. It's kind of similar to my thoughts on the Alcaraz and Draper match from the last round on the men's side, where one player's been playing the maximum, the other player's been coasting, and I think that eventually the legs are going to give out for Navarro. Props to Navarro, though, who's shown a ton of overall mental toughness and a ton of overall stamina by surviving all these 3-set marathons here in pretty tough conditions. But the matchup against Kasatkina, she had a couple match points there in the second set. She blew it, then got boomerang broken, and then lost the set, then came back and eventually did win the third. So no harm, no foul, I guess, in theory, but playing an extra hour, basically, of tennis is not going to work out in her benefit against Swiatek, who I think can definitely match her consistency from the baseline. I like Navarro's game a lot, though. I think that she's a very consistent baseliner who definitely, I'd say, limits the unforced errors, and I think that separates her from other players on tour. But Swiatek's on the warpath right now, and it's tough to go against her. But you're looking at what I think should be a pretty interesting matchup, because it's tough to find value. Swiatek's minus 1,200. Navarro's plus 800. For the game spread, you have around 5.5 or 6. And for the over-under, you have 18.5. Now, for team totals here, you have Swiatek plus 12.5, or I should say over 12.5 at plus 145. The under's minus 165, and Navarro, team total over 6.5 is minus 110. The under's minus 110 as well. So, one matchup in the head-to-head. It's very dated, though, so it really doesn't matter. Faced off in 2018, the Futures event, Swiatek won 6-0, 6-2. So it really comes down to your thoughts on Navarro's overall stamina for this matchup, because if you think Navarro is fully healthy and there are no ill effects to playing, once again, 12 sets of tennis in Australia right now before facing off against Swiatek, then you might think she has a shot. If you think that fatigue's going to be an issue, and you think Swiatek's too good right now, then you think she kills her. So it kind of comes down to your overall, I'd say, stance on the stamina angle. I care about stamina a lot. I think it's very important. And I think when you're going into a battle against a solid baseliner like Swiatek, you really might be out of gas very quickly. And if that happens, she might just completely roll over and get buried. So I'm going to go with Swiatek here. I can't really go against the player who wins every set comfortably and who looks like the favorite to win the event right now, or at least one of them. I know that Sabalenka is a 2-time defending champion. Based on current form, I think that Swiatek's looked better than Sabalenka so far in the event, but it's kind of close. Both players have been great. That might be a decent collision course we might be getting later on in the event. But either way, point is for this one, I'm going to go with Swiatek. She's been too good. She's barely been on the court. Navarro's been winning. It has not been easy, though. I think Swiatek, despite being a minus 1,200 favorite, should have win very comfortably. I think this match will be over quickly. I think Navarro ends up winning maybe like 4 games in the entire match. I think she might get absolutely destroyed in this one. So give me Swiatek for this matchup. Yes, Navarro's been good. Yes, I like her overall form, but I do have serious concerns about the fatigue, especially based on the hot weather in Australia. So give me Swiatek to dominate in this one. That's going to wrap it up, though, for the actual preview of the women's quarterfinal matchups. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. For that, though, I want to remember once again that we are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, because they have all your items in their pick menu. They have a lot of ways to make money easily with profit boosts and Gimme Pick'em. They have the NFL, college football, college basketball, MMA, NBA, NASCAR, and more, including tennis. You can also use specials and boosts on Netflix entries. For my entry, I think I'll do Josh Allen higher rush attempts in his game against the Chiefs coming up on Sunday. I think I'll be running, whether it involves short yard situations or even just trying to scramble out of the pocket to keep the pass rush in check. Either way, though, a reminder, though, when you do sign up for a new account, use the promo code SGPN. claim a special pick a first-time positive offer up to 1K bonus cash on fantasy promo code SGPN. We're also brought to by Rhythm. If you want to try building betting models, Rhythm can help you with that because Rhythm does have a lot of tools that can help you build models, whether you are an elite bettor, a new bettor, or somewhere in between. A reminder, though, that they do have a lot of great options to help you build models. You can get predictions on money line spreads, holds, and props. You can also try it in a couple ways. Build your own from scratch, copy one from the leaderboard, or you can even let Rhythm build one for you in seconds. Track your props in the Rhythm app. You could also use NFL picks, NFL props, college basketball, NBA. Rhythm has it all. And a reminder, claim your set in future all today by going to sports.com's Rhythm, sports.com's RITHMM. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Just finished previewing the women's quarterfinal matchups. Now it's time for the lock and dog pick. For the lock, actually, I am going to go back to the last match between Swiatek and Navarro, and I am going to lay it here. Give me Swiatek minus 5.5 games at minus 140. First reason, I saw a massive price differential where Bet Rivers was minus 177. I found a minus 140, so I do like the price there. If your book is now somewhere in the realm of about minus 160 on this one, I think I'd rather just go with the team total under for Navarro at 6.5. But the point is, I think that Swiatek buries her in this one. Swiatek's lost. This is an insane stat, by the way. In the last 3 matches combined, Swiatek has lost 4 games. 4. She's had a bagel in each of the last 3 rounds. That is insane to think about. But she's dropped a total of 4 games in her last 6 sets combined. She has been destroying everybody. So she's been in great form, and you're looking at Navarro, who's been involved in a ton of marathons. Every match here has been an absolute war. Her match against Stearns was 3+ hours. It was absolute chaos. Point is, though, in the conditions here in Australia, I wonder how much you can actually have left in the tank when you face off against an elite player like Swiatek. I think it's a bad spot for Navarro. I think Navarro's in trouble, and I do think that Swiatek should win this one in straight sets. I think you're looking at what should be a pretty easy win for her. I'll go with Swiatek to get the job done here, minus the 5.5 as my lock here at minus 140. Once again, if you don't have that, take the team total instead for Navarro under. Now, for my dog, it's going to be a baby dog, but I am going to go with the Goff and Badoza match, and I am going to go with Goff team total over 12.5 games at even money. So Goff's actually been going over this number despite winning in straight sets in the event and a decent amount of the matches. Goff's gone over this team total in 2 of her last 3 matches. Had a 3-set marathon against Bencic, and she did win a set 7-5 a couple rounds ago. So you might end up seeing at least one competitive set, and that's really all you need if Goff is going to go over this team total. There's also been a lot of competitive sets in Badoza's matches because there's been at least a 7-5 or a 7-6 set in 4 Badoza's last 6 matches. So Badoza tends to find herself in a tiebreak or 7-5, and I think that's definitely going to work into our favor here with the team total over. But Goff, I think, will look better over the course of these 2 or 3 sets. But I don't think Badoza is going to go down quietly. I think she'll be able to make it interesting. Each of the last 2 matchups went to a deciding set. Goff's gone over this team total each of the last 2 head-to-head meetings, so I do think that the history supports the argument. Goff's once again gone over in 2 of the last 3, and Badoza's been involved in a couple of marathon sets. Once again, Goff can win comfortably in 1 set, and as long as there's a 7-5 or 7-6, you win. Or if it goes 3 sets and even Goff loses, you can still win this play. But give me a competitive matchup here, and with that being the case, I think you're looking at Goff team total being a pretty solid option to get the job done, because if we're wrong, and if you end up getting 1 competitive set and 1 straightforward one, you still win if Goff gets it done. So once again, the plays here for the women's quarterfinal matchups, the lock's going to be on Swiatek, minus 5.5 games at minus 140. For the dog, I am going to go with Goff team total over 12.5 games here at even money in our matchup against Badoza. That's going to wrap up, though. Reminder back once again for the men's semifinal matchups in a few days. Until then, you can find me on Twitter, Reichel Radio. Find me on the NBA show and the MLB show, a couple of shows with the network. And a reminder as well, we are at $6.99 for tennis subscribers on YouTube. So please help us get over 700. Trying to get to 1,000 over the next couple of months. I think it is, without bias, the best, I'd say, free tennis pick show on the planet. If you think there's a better one, name it. But we give out all these picks for free. We break down all the events. We don't skip anything. And a reminder that you can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Spotify or Apple. But most importantly, you can find it free of charge. A lot of people charging online for really bad tennis picks. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about on Twitter. These are all free. Hopefully you've made money with us along the way. Hopefully keep doing so. But please help spread the podcast, that's a knowledge, through word of mouth. And don't forget to let other people know that they can find free tennis insights on all of these matches moving forward. Until next time, though, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.